I'll say it again. I think our ability to tackle the climate crisis requires both hope and truth in equal measure. Hope without truth is delusion. Truth without hope? Well, that's just depressing. So here's a truth we must face. We have a climate crisis, and our human activity is driving it.
This is usually when someone in the back pipes up.
All of this with the global warming and that, a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
It's so hard to know what to say to your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving.
I mean, there is of course the fact that 97% of actively publishing climate scientists agree that our climate is changing and it's the result of our human activity.
But the thing about crazy uncles is that the science doesn't always mean a whole lot to them. Unlike crazy uncles, however, most of us only need to look around to know the science is true.
We can't deny that the average temperatures on Earth have been going up dramatically. 21 of the 22 hottest years ever recorded have happened since the year 2002. And the hottest of all have been the last 9. The final calculations for 2023 aren't done yet, but when they are, it will definitely be on this list.
With news just into CNN, it's now official. This summer is the hottest on record globally by a huge margin.
You heard that right. We already know the summer of 2023 was the hottest summer ever recorded across the entire world. Record-setting heat waves pounded multiple regions of the world, smashing long-standing daily temperature records across the South and Southwestern United States, Southern Europe, Africa, and Asia.
The places that we expect to be hot, particularly in North Africa and the Middle East, they're hot, and they're only getting hotter.
But places we don't expect to be unreasonably hot, like British Columbia and the Northwest United States, reached temperatures up to 116 degrees in a summer heat wave in 2021.
This was the most anomalous extreme heat event that scientists have ever recorded on Earth. In layman's terms, that just ain't right, y'all.
2021 was, at the time, the hottest summer on record in Asia and in Europe. That is, of course, until it wasn't. That summer, a heat record for Europe was set in Sicily, Italy. So freaking hot that snails, a local delicacy, cooked in their shells. In January 2022, the temperature in Onslow, Western Australia reached 123 degrees Fahrenheit, tying the record at the time for the hottest temperature ever recorded in the Southern Hemisphere. A few months later, Pakistan and India had their hottest March and April in at least 122 years. Scientists said it was 30 times more likely to happen because of man-made global warming pollution. Over the last several years, long-standing heat records have been falling like dominoes all around the world. September of 2023 was the world's warmest September ever recorded, following, as we know, record summer heat in the months that preceded it. The unprecedented temperature was described by one climate scientist as absolutely gobsmackingly bananas. Yep, seems about right.
So here's what happens. 93% of the extra heat that we're producing through greenhouse gas emission goes into the ocean. And what happens as oceans warm?
Well, when storms cross warmer ocean waters, they get much stronger. The consequence is more cyclones, hurricanes, typhoons, and tropical storms. Here is Hurricane Ida from the International Space Station in August of 2021. Ida intensified as it came across waters in the Gulf of Mexico that were 7 degrees warmer than normal. And as a result, it created tremendous damage in the coastal areas of Louisiana and nearby.
But it wasn't done there. It continued north up the East Coast and slammed into New Jersey and New York, dropping 9.5 inches of rain in many places, spreading throughout the region, and killing 84 people by the time it was done. That same year, Tropical Cyclone Tauktae was the strongest storm ever to make landfall in the west coast of India, displacing over 200,000 people, killing 169, and causing widespread infrastructure and agricultural damage. 2 of the strongest storms to ever hit Central America, Category 4 hurricanes Eta and Iota, came within just 2 weeks of each other in November of 2020. Together, they affected 7.3 million people and killed more than 200. In Honduras alone, the storms caused $10 billion in damage,
The United States was hit with their own Category 4 hurricane when Hurricane Ian made landfall in September of 2022. Globally, climate-related disasters in 2022 cost $313 billion in damages. More than one-third of that total was from Hurricane Ian. 8 million people were ordered to evacuate Japan after Typhoon Hagibis went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 in less than 24 hours. That kind of rapid intensification of storms is a new feature that's driven by man-made global warming.
Hurricane Dorian was the strongest storm ever to make landfall in the Atlantic Ocean, hitting the Bahamas and stalling 40 hours while it dropped 5 feet of rain. That's another new feature of ocean-based storms. They stall for longer. Cyclone Idai was deemed one of the worst weather-related disasters to ever hit the southern hemisphere. In Mozambique, at least 1,000 people were killed in flooding and mudslides.
Madagascar has been pummeled by climate-induced extreme weather. In early 2022, a tropical storm there killed at least 34 people. Then, at the start of 2023, Cyclone Chinesso killed 30 people and displaced nearly 40,000. It was quickly followed by Cyclone Freddy at the end of February, affecting 78,000 people and killing 7, before moving on to hit Zimbabwe and Mozambique with torrential downpours.
In addition to making storms stronger, warmer water in oceans also means that there's a lot more water vapor that evaporates into the sky. When I was a 4th grade teacher, I taught the basic water cycle. Water evaporates from the ocean. It then falls as precipitation on land. The water that falls as precipitation then works its way through streams and rivers back again to the ocean to repeat the cycle. But that cycle's all out of whack, and it's intensified far more than scientists ever expected it would. For every 1 degree increase in water temperature, there's a 7% increase in water vapor in the sky, which means that there's much more water available to fall in extreme single-event downpours, also known as rain bombs, like this one in Midland, Texas in 2021, and this one in Montana, and this one in Arizona. Think for a moment of the mighty Mississippi River. As the extra heat from the oceans evaporate into water vapor in the sky, it creates atmospheric rivers, a large, long, narrow stream of water vapor that carries on average as much water as 25 Mississippi rivers and can dump months' worth of rain and snow in just days. Here's one that formed in February of 2017 from Hawaii more than 1,200 miles to the Silicon Valley. And here is the effect of a rain bomb in San Jose.
In 2023, an endless stream of atmospheric rivers hit California. 12 significant atmospheric rivers lashed California and the West Coast in just the first quarter of the year. 32 million people across 90% of the state were under flood watches, warnings, or evacuations. The number of record-breaking downpours have been getting steadily worse and more frequent and is now a commonplace occurrence all around the world. Worldwide floods and extreme rain events are happening 4 times more frequently than it was just 40 years ago. And scientists are telling us it's going to get worse.
This was a once-in-a-thousand-year event in Maryland in May 2018. This particular city had 2 once-in-a-thousand-year events within 3 years. In July of 2022, St. Louis, Missouri, got over 12 inches of rain in 12 hours, the first of 3 once-in-a-thousand-year events that occurred over a period of 8 days. In Kentucky, the second one of these once-in-a-thousand-year events resulted in significant flooding that killed 37 people.
Just a few days later, the third event happened in Illinois with 12 inches of rain in 12 hours. Just to be sure that registers, you're supposed to have a once-in-a-thousand-year event once every 1,000 years. So 3 of these in just 8 days, it's not good. In February 2020, the United Kingdom was hit by multiple rain bombs. October 3rd of that year was the wettest day in their history.
Here's the result of rain bombs that hit New York City in 2021.
While in China that summer, the Henan province had the worst rains in 1,000 years. In May of the following year, 17 cities were flooded in another province, followed quickly by a flood in June that impacted millions.
In 2021, flooding across Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands killed 220 and caused more than $40 billion in damage. And I'm pretty sure this isn't normally supposed to happen. This was in Norway a couple of years ago. An entire small peninsula washed out to sea after days of severe downpours. At the start of 2022, massive flooding caused death and other damage in the capital of Ecuador. Thousands were evacuated in Sydney, Australia due to flash flooding.
In a period of a year and a half, there were 4 flood emergencies there. 35 towns in the Amazon region of Brazil were flooded in May and June of 2022, while across the country, 91 people were killed by flooding in the state of Pernambuco.
Millions were displaced in India and Bangladesh as whole villages flooded in May of this year. Monsoons in both countries are getting more extreme. The deadliest weather-related disaster in all of 2020 occurred in India when 1,900 people were killed in monsoon downpours. Later in the summer of 2022, Pakistan was absolutely devastated when it was hit by monsoon rains 10 times heavier than usual. 33 million were affected, more than 1,000 killed, over 3 million were displaced, and homes and infrastructure were destroyed.
Just a few months later, more than 600 people died and nearly 1.5 million were displaced in Nigerian floods.
South Korea also set an all-time record of 15 inches of rain in one day in the capital of Seoul,
prompting the South Korean president to declare that we can no longer call this kind of weather event unusual. The largest, highest record can be broken at any time.
And what happens when there's a lot of rain? Mudslides.
Like this one in Guatemala, triggered by Hurricane Eta that killed at least 50 people. Or this one in Afghanistan that followed flash floods and led to 113 deaths. Colombia has been hit by repeated downpours and mudslides.
In April of 2021, at least 126 people were killed by mudslides in Indonesia, followed by this one in India a couple of months later.
More than a month worth of rain fell in a few hours in Petrópolis, Brazil, triggering landslides that killed more than 200 people. In April of that year, South Africa was hit by their deadliest storm on record. More than 450 people died and 4,000 homes and buildings were destroyed in the massive flooding and mudslides that followed.
So you know all that extra heat that evaporates more ocean water and creates more cyclones, hurricanes, tropical storms, rain bombs, floods, and mudslides? Well, it also pulls moisture out of the soil, which means droughts take hold more quickly.
Large parts of the central United States are in severe to exceptional drought. 36% of Kansas, for example, is in exceptional drought. In the American Southwest, the last 2 decades have been the driest in at least 1,200 years, leading many to describe it not as a drought, but a mega-drought. The current drought in the western United States is the first mega-drought caused largely by human activity.
This is the largest reservoir in the United States, Lake Mead, which is now down to levels not seen since they started filling it in the 1930s. Millions of people depend on that water for their daily lives. Here's Lake Powell in Utah, with water in 2021 and without in 2022.
As of March 2023, it reached another historic low, dropping to just 23% of its capacity.
That same month, the Glen Canyon Dam on Lake Powell in Arizona was just 32 feet above the critical level at which the dam can no longer produce electricity. Of course, we're not alone.
Chile and Argentina have been experiencing the driest period in their history since at least the year 1400 AD.
A few years ago in Chile, an agricultural emergency was declared in 100 different regions because of drought, and it's only worsened. In April 2022, Chile's capital, Santiago, announced that it would begin rotating water rations for its citizens.
In Monterrey, Mexico, they've already endured extreme water rationing. And look at the projection for drought to come across North and Central America throughout this century. You can see how harsh the prediction is unless we change. Across Europe, the recent multi-year drought is the worst in 2,000 years.
Both Portugal and Spain are experiencing extraordinary drought. 96% of Portugal was in severe or extreme drought as of June 2022.
An important reservoir, this lake in France, went dry in 2022, leaving 100 villages without water in their worst drought on record.
Il y a plus d'une centaine de communes en France qui aujourd'hui n'ont plus d'eau potable et pour lesquelles il y a des approvisionnements qui se font avec de l'eau qu'on achemine en camion dans ces communes puisqu'il n'y a plus rien effectivement dans les canalisations.
Parts of Poland and Romania have experienced the worst drought in a century. The Czech Republic is experiencing the worst drought in 500 years. Receding rivers in one northern Czech town have recently exposed ominous carved boulders known as hunger stones, used for centuries to commemorate historic droughts and forecast famine. The message on one: if you see me, weep.
The rainy seasons have been failing in many places across Africa as well, and this season is already well below average.
Drought in Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia has killed more than 3 million livestock.
In the Horn of Africa, where the population is sustained mainly through livestock and agriculture, prolonged drought has created acute food insecurity.
When the temperature goes up and the land dries out, we have more fires. You all do see what keeps happening here, right? We've all seen the horrific fires in California. In January of 2022, Big Sur burned, as did Yosemite, threatening the 3,000-year-old iconic sequoia trees.
Months of drought and high winds from a distant hurricane contributed to the devastating fire in 2023 that ravaged historic Lahaina town in Maui, Hawaii, and killed 114 people. In Oregon, more than 400,000 acres burned.
Oh, and here's the kicker. As of September 2021, at least 253,000 acres of forest designated to provide carbon emission offsets to major companies in the U.S. were impacted by wildfires across 3 states.
But there's more. Wind from the unprecedented wildfire season in the Pacific Northwest that summer blew smoke into the Pacific Ocean and onto California.
This photo was taken just after noon in San Francisco on September 9th, 2020. I'm just gonna say it. If an apocalypse ever comes, that is how I expect it to look.
Or maybe it'll look a little like this, when a smoky haze from Canadian wildfires hung over New York City in 2023, turning the skies orange.
If ever we needed a wake-up call that this is becoming the new normal, this would be a good one. Again, we're not alone. Tens of thousands were evacuated as fires raged across southern Europe and northern Africa in the summer of 2021. So many persistent and terrible fires led the Greek Prime Minister to declare that climate change is taking its toll.
The last few years in Australia have seen incredible fires. Here are Australian bushfires from satellite. By mid-January 2020, smoke from Australian fires had completely circled the globe. And now scientists are telling us that smoke from those fires has actually added to a spike in global warming. In 2021, wildfires scorched an area of Siberian forest nearly the size of Cambodia.
And don't forget lightning, because lightning is increasing too. For every 1 degree increase in temperature, there's a 10 to 12% increase in lightning. In August 2020, nearly 14,000 lightning strikes ignited 900 fires in California in just a 72-hour period. The lightning strikes in the Arctic have increased 300% in just the last decade. A lightning storm coincided with a natural gas pipeline leak to spark this fire in the ocean. I'll say that again. The ocean was on fire. This is about the time that fool in the back pipes up again. That's not how it works. Climate change is having a profound impact on the North Pole, Arctic Ocean, and Greenland. A 1 degree increase at the equator can be 3 times that much or more in the Arctic. We've already seen 3 years in a row with extraordinarily high temperatures, 50 degrees warmer than normal. Since the last ice age, our whole civilization has been built on patterns of wind and ocean currents that help more evenly distribute moisture and temperature on Earth. It impacts where land is fertile and crops can grow. Did you hear the part where I said our whole civilization was built around this? But now, because the phenomenon of increased temperature and melting ice in the Arctic Ocean, that pattern is getting super wonky. The Northern Hemisphere jet stream is one system in danger of disruption. When we have a stable polar vortex, that jet stream is usually a tight circle that only at times gets wavier. The climate crisis is making this much wavier. This was January of 2021. Wavy, right? Scientists began to warn us of the high potential for extreme cold events far south in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's exactly what happened. Just 6 weeks later, the jet stream was stretched all the way down to Texas, producing extraordinarily cold temperatures,
knocking out much of the state's power grid for several days, causing hundreds of deaths, billions of dollars of damage, and leaving millions without water or heat.
1 year later, in December 2022, another major polar event happened, killing at least 52 people and exposing major flaws in our energy systems as massive power outages spread.
And of course, as ice melts in the Arctic, we have more water in oceans and sea rise. This threatens the whole world, and cities like Miami and New York are among the most at risk. It's why we see octopus in a parking lot in Miami, why Venice has flooded 6 times over the last 1,200 years, but 4 of those 6 times have been in the last 20 years. Why Kiribati, a low-lying Pacific Island nation, was the first nation to purchase land elsewhere for their citizens to go and live.
This is the high tide flood frequency in the United States. These green dots are where the flooding is increasing steadily. Red ones are where it's increasing exponentially. Sea level is going up because oceans are getting warmer and ice is melting.
Phew. Are you all truthed out? Yeah, me too. But here's the thing. Even as I share these examples, climate events are breaking records every day. I just can't make this video fast enough. So let's not be a crazy uncle, y'all.
You can fight climate change with suntan lotion. It's not that big of a deal.
No, human beings, when temperature goes up, human beings live longer.
Truth isn't truth.
Okay, it'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Let's face the truth. Climate change is happening. Our human activities are driving it, and it's making our weather more extreme.